One company, in a rush to stay ahead, created its worst nightmare. Let's take a look at the Sega 32X.
What's up guys, Retro Gamer Gen X back with another look at video. And in today's look at, we're going to be checking out that system right there, the Sega 32X. We're going to be looking at the history of the 32X, looking what's inside of the 32X, basically what makes it tick, doing a 360 tour, powering it on, and doing some gameplay. And at the end, giving you my thoughts and opinions about the system back in the good old 90s. And in between each segment, I always put commercials in, just showing how the system was marketed back in the day. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look, guys.
Machine has appeared in homes across America.
Double and redouble his power. 32.
6 times more powerful than 3DO.
Alright, baby.
40 times more than Super NES.
Hey, yo, there is no 32-bit Super NES. Are we gonna see the games or what? Show me!
Increase the power meter 40 times.
Thank you.
The story of the 32X started in January of 1994. Sega president Hayao Nakayama was worried about the Atari Jaguar that was released in November of '93, taking a share of the gaming market away from Sega. This was due to the fact that Sega was already working on Project Saturn, but it was not scheduled to be released until late 1994 in Japan and mid-1995 in North America. He was so worried that during the CES show, he called Joe Miller, head of Sega of America's R&D department, and conferenced in Sega of America's producer, Scott Bayless, Sega of America's vice president of technology, Marty France, and Sega hardware team, Hideki Sato, advising them of developing a quick response to the Jaguar. After the phone call, Sega of America CEO Tom Kalinske argued that they could get another year of life out of the Genesis without the need of another system. Sega of Japan disagreed and wanted a whole new system design. This started the development of Project Jupiter, a whole new system based off the Genesis. This new system would have been a 32-bit system with an upgraded color palette and some 3D capabilities. But Miller disagreed with this idea, stating that if you're just going to upgrade the same system, you might as well just make an add-on for it. Sega of Japan and America compromised, and another add-on was made for the Genesis. They discontinued Project Jupiter and started Project Mars. The Sega of America team headed the Mars project. They designed it to use 2 of the 32-bit Super H2 Hitachi CPUs that were developed in 1993 jointly with Sega for use in the Saturn. But for this project, the clock speed was reduced. The system would be able to use the Sega Genesis CPU, GPU, and sound chips. If you had the Sega CD, it could use its hardware as well. Although only 5 games were released in the CD format that used the Genesis, Sega CD, and 32X's hardware altogether. Although the system's design was more powerful than originally conceived using the Saturn's processors, it was not going to be compatible with the Saturn, being its own system. The system was marketed to people who wanted to get into the 32-bit gaming market but couldn't afford the upcoming Saturn. It was also seen as a transitional device between the 16-bit Genesis and the 32-bit Saturn. The 32X was released in November of 1994 in North America for $159, at the same time the Saturn was being released in Japan. Sales of the unit were initially strong. Over 1 million units were ordered, but Sega was only able to produce 600,000 units by the end of 1994, due to the shortage of CPUs being used in the Saturn as well. By Christmas of '94, 500,000 units were already sold, exceeding Sega's expectations. 6 games were available at launch at the price of $69.99 apiece. It didn't take long for consumers to see that the system was not as good as the hype around it. Development of the system was difficult, making it hard for Sega to secure publishers for games. Most publishers wanted to make games for the upcoming Saturn and not this transitional system. Sega sent out development kits, but by this time it was too late. Game publishers bailed on the 32X, with only a total of 40 games being made for the system, most being rushed out and not being completed. Sega was impressed with the sales figures early in the release. They started development of another system, the Sega Neptune. This was to be a Sega Genesis and 32X in one console, but soon after this, the media was starting to be very critical about Sega's strategy. Word got out about the games, and the price point, and sales started to plummet. Several of the publishers for the 32X, such as Capcom and Konami, bailed at this point. This was the beginning of the end for the 32X. By mid-1995, it was clear to Sega that the 32X was not going to be successful, and they ordered Sega of America to concentrate its efforts on the Saturn. By September of 95, the price of the units were decreased to $99. By 1996, the system was discontinued and a fire sale started, trying to clear out the remaining inventory, selling the units for $19.99 apiece. Sega had made the same mistake Atari had made, competing with itself. Also, the fact that the system was difficult to develop games for, the publishers bailed, and the price was just too high for an add-on, led to the death of the system. In the process, they lost consumer confidence as consumers saw the 32X as just a greedy money grab between the Genesis and the Saturn. That brings us to the end of the 32X. It had a very short 2-year lifespan, starting in 1994 and being discontinued in 1996, with just over 800,000 units being sold, making it Sega's worst commercial failure.
32X Genesis and Boom so separate.
New Sega Genesis 32X.
Welcome to the next level.
Now let's take a look inside the 32X. It may be small, but there's a lot inside of it. First, let's take a look at the CPUs. That's right, I said CPUs, as the 32X had two Hitachi 32-bit SH2 RISC processors running at 23 MHz. These were labeled HD 6417095. This gives the system 4 fixed-point math processors, 2 multiplier DSPs, 2 DVI-U division units, and 2 DMAs. Next, we look into the GPU. The 32X had a custom 32-bit VDP that ran at 23 MHz and featured 3D polygon graphics, garage shading, texture mapping, additional system sprites, and better animation effects. It had a maximum screen resolution of 320 by 240 or overscanned at 450 by 262. The VDP chip, labeled 315-5781A, worked in conjunction with other custom ICs labeled 315-5818A, the custom GA Mars 1F chip, and the custom Mars 315-5805 address selector to produce graphics. The sound chip was a Q-Sound PWM running at 23 MHz as well. This featured 11-bit stereo pulse wave modulation, providing the system with 12 channels of sound, including what the Genesis provided. This chip was labeled 315-5684. Now let's move on to the system RAM. The 32X had a total of 4 megabits of RAM. This was split between 3 chips. The first 2 are 1 megabits apiece and are labeled TC511664BJ-80. And the last RAM chip is 2 megabits, labeled here as the NEC D4502161G5. Now that about wraps up this a look inside for the 32X.
Series 15 has appeared in homes across America.
32X. Redouble his power.
Go! Just stick it in your Genesis.
Alright, baby.
Can we see that again?
32X.
Let's go!
Increase the power of the unit. Increase the power of the unit 40 times.
Hey man, your set was stolen.
All right, guys, so we've come to the 360 tour of the 32X here. So not much to really look at on this system. So this is the 32X put into the Model 2 Sega Genesis. And this has this little adapter to be able to fit onto this perfectly, so it looks good. So yeah, that clips into there. And then in the back here, it comes with this cable that you would attach to the video out on the Genesis to this, and then you take your video out from this to your TV. And then it also has the jack for power here as well. Another power brick. Makes 3 power bricks for this entire system. Now originally it comes with these like shields that you put inside of the cartridge port here, and then you plug this inside. But really, guys, that's about it for the 32X. I mean, there's not much to it besides let's go ahead and put a 32X cartridge in, and then you would just power on the system and it would boot up to that cartridge there. So really, that's about it, guys. So let's go ahead and power this thing on and do some gameplay.
Virtual Racing! Welcome to NBA Jam! Showtime! Tonight's matchup, Nugget versus Nets. Here's the tip. From the outside, yes! Switch! For two! No good! Yeah!
Since the beginning of time, mankind has striven to double and redouble his powers.
A mysterious machine has appeared in homes across America.
All right, baby.
Increase the power of the unit 40 times.
32. X.
Welcome to the next one.
Please fill your drink. I don't have a drink. Uh-oh.
Alright guys, so we've come to the end of the video here where I give my thoughts and opinion about the system. And 32X, I mean, it's really a system that shouldn't have been. I mean, the Sega Saturn came out at the same exact time. Japan released the Sega Saturn when this was being released in, North America. And it was just horrible to think that Sega would put something out like this and not just release this here at the same time. And, you know, it seemed like a money grab to the consumer, and it lost consumer confidence in Sega. And really, that was the beginning of the downfall of Sega at that point. And I think that's the system that really started the whole thing. The Sega Saturn was, you know, a great system. I'm not going to lie, but was it really that successful? And then y'all know about the Dreamcast over here. And so I think it kind of just started tumbling down from there for Sega. If they wouldn't have released that system, we might still be playing Sega games today. I don't know. That's kind of the way I feel. But yeah, and you guys saw how the marketing was. The commercials weren't all that great. They just basically recycled the same content and made it into different commercials. So yeah, they didn't even market it very well. So. But anyway, guys, that kind of brings me to the end of the video here. If you like the content, go ahead and hit that like button. If you like that much, go ahead and subscribe to me. And then don't forget to hit that notification bell. That way you get notifications every time I drop new content here. But I want to say thanks to all my subs, and I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Y'all have a great one. Peace out.
Game over, man.